Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we hope you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Arianna Campbell. Arianna, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thanks, Jon.
All right. Arianna is one of our shareholders as well, one of our fearless consultants specializing in process improvement, leadership, talent, among other things. But our conversation today is going to be based around processes. So, every firm is talking about capacity shortage or talent shortage or needing to do more with less. And though you've been preaching process improvement for many, many years, I think we've seen a renewed interest even in firms, maybe a firm that hasn't been interested in this topic in the past, or maybe it's interest in a new perspective or in a new way. So as we talk about how to improve processes within your firm, why is it important for firms to really think about doing this?
So when we think about, the processes within our firm, they really are the backbone or the foundation for all that we do, right? Everything in your business is built upon a process and a way of getting things done. And when it comes to those processes, having them be clear and consistent helps you to discover additional opportunities. It helps you to create capacity, because when the processes aren't clear and consistent, you end up wasting a lot of time focusing on things that really are just, wasteful activities or things that aren't adding value. And when you think about the ripple effect of that, it impacts our people, because they're having to spend time working in ineffective processes instead of spending their time on things that are more valuable. And ultimately, it impacts our clients, because we're not able to serve them as well, because we're trying to work our way through muddled processes and find ourselves spending more time doing that when we could be focused on client service.
Yes. And I know for you and I, if we are working hard within a process that is very inefficient, we get frustrated quickly and we
Yes.
want to do something else, especially when we know there's a better way out there.
It's such a good point. And that comment ties back to employee morale, right? So your people are already working really hard to get the work done. And when they're working in frustrating processes, that impacts just their overall attitude. And that can start to create, just them being, disgruntled because they know that there's a better or a different way to get things done. And you made the comment, when we opened, about the struggles that we're facing right now with talent shortages and things like that. We want to make sure that we're not adding extra challenges of ineffective processes to the things that we're already trying to address with our talent force to begin with.
So most firms kind of know that there's multiple areas within their organization in which they could be improving processes, right? So it can start to feel a little overwhelming. So some firms don't even move forward at all because they're kind of stuck in analysis paralysis, right, as it pertains to this topic. So what's your advice or guidance on what firms can do to actually start to improve kind of the right processes?
Yeah, so one of the most effective strategies is to start with the area where there's the most buy-in for process improvement, especially if you're just getting started. Because by doing that and starting with an area that has the most buy-in, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the worst process within the firm. Sometimes by picking the ones that have the most buy-in and seeing some wins from that helps to gain momentum to then address some of those more gnarly processes that are going to take more change leadership, that are going to take more getting people on board. Because sometimes people will try to jump into the most complicated and convoluted process as a place to start. And there do end up being, some impacts from that being such a heavy lift as the starting point. So again, firms can see success by picking a process improvement initiative, because to your point, Jon, there are usually many different opportunities. Pick one where you already have some buy-in, you have some engagement. Let's improve that one, start to see some wins, start to put together our process improvement framework so that then again, we can use that momentum to tackle other areas.
I think that's really good advice, Ariana. And I kind of relate what you're saying to this other idea that's kind of unrelated around how people best pay off debt, right? Some people say, well, I'm going to order my debts and whichever one has the highest interest or the highest interest rate or the largest debt, I'm going to start with that one. I'm going to tackle the big one first, right? And then guess what? They burn out. It's too complicated. Maybe they're biting off more than they can chew, versus kind of the debt snowball method, which is, hey, list them in order, but focus on the one you can create the most momentum with first, and start to tackle that one and create that momentum, that kind of forward progress, and carry that into the next one. So I kind of relate kind of what you're saying to that. It's almost creating a process improvement snowball within your firm, right? You want to get that process in motion, get those wins in motion, get those wins under people's belts, and then they feel more confident and capable to tackle that next kind of that next opportunity there. So as you see firms do this, as you guide firms through this process, I mean, you've worked with firms of various sizes, all the way from probably more easily improved processes to very large and cumbersome process improvement initiatives, all within that spectrum. What are some successes you've seen when firms have actually focused on this?
I think one of the biggest successes is the clarity and consistency in the processes, right? Being able to have more consistent training, more consistent onboarding, more consistent use within those processes, how people are at their best and highest use. And the talent payoff is the biggest win. Now, again, as I said earlier, there's a ripple effect to the clients and a ripple effect to the firms overall, but so much of it starts with our people. So by taking the time to improve the processes and really invest in doing that, it pays off from a talent perspective. And we're seeing that more and more. We actually, a couple firms that we work with are even using their process improvement initiatives as part of their recruiting strategies to say, hey, we're not doing things in the same way as the same old, same old. We know how frustrating that is. We know that there's a better way to do things, and that we're committed to continually looking at how we can improve. And it is really resonating with the potential new hires that they're talking to. So again, it becomes, and one of the biggest successes from my perspective is with your people. But I would say along with that, you really have to be committed to it. It can't just be lip service or a one and done. I often say to firms that I work with that process improvement isn't something that you did, it's something that you're doing. And so you need to make sure that it is something that is ongoing, so that you can continue to see those lasting impacts on your people. And then from there, you can continue to leverage that momentum, as we talked about earlier, to make improvements across the firm.
I love how you tied that to recruiting, right? I think oftentimes firms don't think about using
Mhm.
that type of information when recruiting, but high performers want to work in organizations that are efficient, that are properly leveraging technology, that are working as a team, allocating resources correctly. That's where you want your best and brightest. They want to be there. And I love the idea, just the thought process around a firm using that in their recruiting conversations. And then guess what? When that person, that student, that potential new hire goes to another firm to interview with them, now they're asking questions about process improvement or workflow that
Mhm.
maybe that they're now kind of using your firm as a gold standard to compare to. And
Yeah.
so I think that's neat. I also love the idea around um, when your team, your talent is not putting energy into figuring out how to navigate a cumbersome workflow, where can they place that energy, right? Where would they spend that additional energy? Um, Probably something of higher value,
Yeah.
right, to the firm and to the client. So I just
And to
love
the
that.
person who's doing the work, right? Because
Mhm.
people get burned out working on processes that they know could be done a better way. And quite frankly, the first place that we think about is that impact to self on the day to day. And so it really is beneficial in so many different ways for obviously the client and the firm, but for the employee specifically, because they can work on developing their skills instead of trying to manage, whether it be 18 different ways of doing things, that it depends on who you're working with, that's how, I have to do this so many different ways. That becomes really inconsistent and inefficient. Or if it's because you're not leveraging technology effectively, or if it's just because processes haven't been updated and who knows how long, all those things cause so much process friction that have a direct impact to the employee. And one thing that I think is really interesting right now that firms are starting to explore now as well is when you have that happening within your firm, that can also tie into, we hear so many conversations about employee wellness, and having employees that are frustrated and have that friction can contribute to that. So processes being looked at in so many different ways, way beyond efficiency as it was looked at years ago.
Absolutely. All right. So Arianna, as we wrap up our conversation here, what's your one piece of advice in terms of maybe the next step someone should take? They stop listening to this podcast, they pull into their, driveway, or they pull into their office, and they say, all right, I'm going to go have some conversations maybe with people in our company around this idea. What's some next steps they should take?
I think one of the first places to start is with helping people to understand the benefits and what's to be gained by looking at process improvement. Then to identify where are the greatest opportunities within the firm to focus on process improvement. Again, remembering that might not be the most complicated process. It could be, but maybe there's more buy-in in other processes within the firm. And then start looking into resources to really do process improvement effectively. We work with firms and use a process improvement framework that's proven to be successful, because you need to have the actual, I guess framework is the best way to use it, best word to use in order for it to be successful. And you want to make sure that you are going to get a return for the efforts that you're putting in. So I would say that those are the best next steps to take, but the only step to not take is to just do nothing. So we need to make sure that we're figuring out what is the process improvement strategy within our firms.
Awesome, Arianna. Well, as always, it's a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for being on the podcast. And for our listeners, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. We always rotate topics, whether it's process today, it might be technology next week, or leadership, or talent, or growth related. But the common theme is these topics are all critical to your firm's success. So please subscribe. Thanks for listening, and thanks, Arianna.
Thank you, John.